All right, let's dive into the story of a woman who started out as a shy, insecure girl, but grew to become one of the most powerful voices of the entire 20th century. She didn't just change what it meant to be First Lady, she used that role to become a global champion for human rights.
And this title, First Lady of the World, that wasn't just some nice compliment. This came from President Truman himself. It was a real recognition of her incredible work on the world stage long after her time in the White House. It just goes to show you, her legacy was truly global.
So the big question is, how on earth did this happen? This wasn't someone who was born with this unshakable confidence. Her story is this incredible journey of personal transformation, one that was forged in tragedy and hardship. It's what turned this quiet, insecure girl into a true global icon.
To really get who she became, we have to go all the way back to her beginning. A life that started a world away from the White House. A life defined by huge privilege, but also just this deep personal pain.
You know, the thing about her youth is this wild contrast. On one hand, she had immense privilege, born into the famous Roosevelt family. But on the other, her childhood was filled with tragedy. She lost both her parents before she was 10. She was then raised by a grandmother who was cold and constantly critical, leaving Eleanor feeling like an ugly duckling, just desperate for affection she almost never got. That early pain, though, it created this deep sense of empathy that would really fuel her life's work.
The real game changer came when she was sent to a boarding school in England. The headmistress there, a woman named Marie Souvestre, saw a spark in Eleanor. She really challenged her to think for herself and ignited the social conscience that would come to define her entire life. For the first time, Eleanor felt like her mind was valued, and she started to build a real sense of self-worth.
So she comes back to the U.S. and marries her ambitious cousin Franklin. But for years, her life was still not her own. She was living under the thumb of her incredibly controlling mother-in-law Sarah, who ran everything in their home. Eleanor even said that she found being a mother to be an ordeal. Honestly, looking at her then, you'd never guess she would become the fiercely independent public figure we know her as today.
So what flipped the switch? Well, it turns out two absolutely devastating personal crises would completely shatter her world. And in doing so, they would be the very thing that set her free.
The first blow came when she was unpacking her husband's suitcase. She found a stack of love letters from her own social secretary, Lucy Mercer. Discovering Franklin's affair was this profound betrayal, and it changed their marriage forever.
Then, just 3 years after that, Franklin was stricken with polio. The illness left his legs permanently paralyzed, and it looked like his political career was completely over.
So yeah, their romantic marriage was pretty much done. But from those ashes, this incredible political partnership was born. Eleanor refused to let Franklin give up. She pushed him to stay in politics and became his public face, his voice. And in doing that, she had to step out of the shadows and build her own life, discovering her own power along the way.
Okay, so fast forward to 1933. Franklin becomes president right in the middle of the Great Depression, and Eleanor Roosevelt just completely rips up the rule book for what a first lady is supposed to be. She had zero interest in just being a hostess.
She became the eyes and ears of the New Deal, and she took that job literally. She traveled constantly, visiting struggling miners in Appalachia, farmers in the Dust Bowl, you name it. She would listen to their stories and then go straight back to Franklin, making sure the human cost of the Depression was never just a number to him.
And get this, her media strategy was absolutely brilliant, way ahead of its time. She wrote a daily newspaper column, My Day, she had a radio show, she held press conferences. She created this direct line to the American people that no First Lady had even dreamed of before.
348. That's how many press conferences she held. But here's the genius part. They were for female reporters only. Now, this wasn't just a symbolic thing. It was a power move. It forced news organizations to keep women on staff if they wanted access to the First Lady. It literally changed the face of the Washington press corps.
And she wasn't afraid to use her platform to make a stand, a huge one. When the famous African-American singer Marian Anderson was told she couldn't perform at a venue because of her race, Eleanor didn't just write a letter. She publicly resigned from the organization in protest and then helped arrange for Anderson to give an unforgettable concert on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial instead.
You know, this kind of outspoken advocacy, especially for civil rights, made some powerful people very angry. The FBI director, J. Edgar Hoover, couldn't stand her, and he had the agency compile a file on her that was over 3,000 pages long.
It's just a crazy reminder of how threatening the establishment found her powerful, independent voice.
But here's the thing. Her story doesn't end when she leaves the White House. Not by a long shot. In fact, you could argue her most important work was just getting started.
So after Franklin dies, the new president, Harry Truman, knows exactly who to call. He recognized her global stature and appointed her as one of the very first U.S. delegates to the brand new United Nations. She just poured all of her energy into building this institution that she hoped could bring about world peace.
And at the UN, she became the driving force behind one of the most important documents of the 20th century. As the chair of the Human Rights Commission, she somehow managed to steer this diverse, often bickering, group of delegates toward a single goal: creating the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
And this quote, right here, it just perfectly nails her whole philosophy. For Eleanor, human rights weren't some abstract idea. They had to mean something in people's everyday lives, in their neighborhoods, in their schools, and their jobs. Because if they don't matter there, she said, they don't matter anywhere.
When you look back, it's just an incredible arc, isn't it? From a shy girl who saw herself as an ugly duckling, she became the first lady of the world. She took a role that was mostly ceremonial and turned it into a platform for real change, proving that a single, persistent, and courageous voice can, in fact, change the world.